basically what ended up happening is our new user sign up chart, which was our North Star metric, was how many signups we could get on a weekly basis. The slope of that graph changed dramatically.
Welcome to Generation Builders podcast, brought to you by Software. I'm your host, Mariam. The goal of the show is to unpack and share the superpowers and lessons of today's most successful software companies and discuss how the next generation will use and build software without code. I interview world-class product, growth, and community experts who help build some of the best companies of today. Welcome, Stella. So excited to have you join us today.
I'm very excited to be here.
So Stella is the co-founder and CEO of Hoop, and Hoop is helping teams to make better decisions faster and without meetings. She'll tell us a bit more about that. But before Hoop, she was the first marketing hire at Trello, and she grew and led the marketing team from early days all the way to tens of millions of users and to the $425 million acquisition by Atlassian. So we're going to learn a lot today. So stay with us. And Stella, would you intro yourself like with your own words, maybe with 2 sentences, and then we dive into the background and your experience at Trello especially?
Definitely. Well, hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I am, I guess, a serial founder and startup person. I started my career being on the founding team of a fintech startup that was acquired by Groupon in 2012. And then I had my own startup for a while that was also acquired. And then I joined Trello, as Miriam said, as the first marketing hire because I was really a power user of the product. I used it to plan my wedding. I was using it to run my startup. And I was really excited to experience like the true hockey stick growth that Trello was seeing, which now there's the term product-led growth. But when I joined in 2014, it was just, we were just making it up as we went along. And so that was quite the experience. And I'm sure we'll dive into that. I left, I stayed actually post-acquisition for about 4 years and at Atlassian, which was an awesome experience. And I left in 2020. And so it's 3.5 years I was there. And then I did some angel investing. I did some advising. I was sort of on this journey trying to figure out what was next for me. And I was able to sync up with 2 of my close friends who we were all on the executive team together at Trello. We had worked together for many years and we thought that was really fun. Let's do it again, but this time let's be founders. And so we decided to take what we'd learned from building a remotely distributed team over the last almost 10 years at Trello. And we were seeing that people were struggling with remote work pre and post or post pandemic. And so we wanted to help teams work more asynchronously. And we're looking for sort of a way into that. And after talking to hundreds of knowledge workers, we found that decision-making was a real challenge. It was a challenge before, but specifically with remote teams and teams trying to work more asynchronously, there was a lot of research and best practices, but not a lot of tooling to support better decision outcomes. And so that's why we decided to start Hoop. And that is what we're working on right now. We're super early. We are in our alpha and looking for users and learning and going on that startup journey again.
Nice. Yeah, I love that. I love that you went back to the startup journey again. And yeah, so let's step back for a minute and chat about Trello.
Yes.
So I actually was going to ask, why did you decide to start with Trello? But it's obvious, right? You love the product, and of course, I think that's the best way to really join something where you already know the product and you're using and you're a happy user. But so after joining, what was really like, if you just look back across the whole journey, what was the hardest part about this 0 to 1 phase in Trello's go-to-market or marketing in general? Because as a first hire, I assume you went there was probably already some amount of users, but maybe you could share how big was the user base, and then how did you help them grow from 0 to 1?
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about Trello, the founders of Trello, Michael Pryor and Joel Spolsky, Joel specifically had a very large following of developers from his really popular blog and books that he had written. So when they launched Trello in 2011 at TechCrunch Disrupt, and it sort of took off organically. Joel had a big audience, and I think that when I joined, it was about accelerating the growth. We knew that the product was resonating, and we also wanted to move away from developers as an audience. It was always meant to be a tool that was for the masses, sort of introducing some of the Kanban and project management in a way that and everyone, like your mom, could be using it. And that was the real promise of Trello. So I think when I joined, I was like employee number 15 or something, and it was mostly engineers, and engineers who I love are very rational people, but they also tend to not like marketing and sales. That has been my experience.
Can confirm that. I'm an ex-engineer, not coding anymore, but yes,
you
that's
know,
true.
they sort of believe that if the product is good enough, the users will come. And I think to a certain extent, that's like a baseline thing that it has to be, especially in the last handful of years in B2B SaaS, where you've seen an explosion of software and choices for people. So at the time, I realized that the real big challenge was cultural, and making the engineers get behind the idea that we should be investing in marketing. And so the very first thing that I did was run a campaign. And it was interesting, when I joined, we didn't have Google Analytics set up, which was crazy because at that point we were just about to reach 5 million signups.
Wow.
And so there was no email service provider. There was literally, I think the first day I like sent out a tweet, and it hadn't, my first day, and we didn't have, like, people would just tweet whenever they wanted. There wasn't any sort of, I think everyone just had the login. It was very, very ad hoc and kind of a second thought. And so I knew that I had to show what an integrated marketing campaign could look like. And that was tough because I was the only person. And so I put together this sort of campaign around this milestone of reaching 5 million users. And this was 2014. So Mashable was big, and infographics were big. And I think skinny jeans also, maybe. I don't know. Just kidding. So we put together this big campaign in this moment, and had some press around it, announcing that we had reached this milestone. And we also did it in a really fun way where, Trello's mascot was a husky that would like pop in sometimes on the app and say "Roo," and so we incorporated Taco into that. And basically what ended up happening is our new user sign up chart, which was our North Star metric, was how many signups we could get on a weekly basis. The slope of that graph changed dramatically. And you couldn't say it was this or that or this. It was like, this is when we did the campaign and the slope of the graph changed. And that's sort of how I always think about marketing at startups, is that, and specifically product marketing, and now what you call product-led growth startups, is marketing adds fuel to the fire. Marketing looks at what's happening in the product, what is making people sign up, what's causing invitations, what are the points of resonance for people. And marketing's job is to elevate that and shout it from the rooftops and use every single channel to help to help bring in more people. And so from that moment of when we could see that very objective, hey, this is the thing we should invest in, I had everyone's buy-in to work with me and to build out a team and to work together. And I think that's really, really important, because in my experience, a lot of times, marketing can butt heads with sales, or with product, or with engineering. Like, these teams, they all have to understand their role in what drives the success of the company and to support each other. And the best way to do that, at least with product and engineering, is through data.
Yeah, exactly. And with that growth, was that mainly, so that was like one campaign you did, but over
Yes.
the next kind of iteration and the next years, what were the key drivers of organic growth of users in Trello? I know you mentioned in one of your other podcasts that you haven't done paid marketing for until I think about the acquisition time. And so obviously everything was organic. What were the main channels that were acquired?
Sure.
Like, of course, word of mouth, but then, yeah, if you can share that.
Of course. So I think with that sort of product led growth model now, people understand that product marketing is really, really important. And having a cadence of product launches is really important because that is the bread and butter of having touch points with your user base, that your user base is excited, you are generating, that community element, maybe a brand that people are really excited about that they're sharing organically through social media. And this is before influencers were really as big as they are today. And so you were trying to cultivate all of that through this regular cadence of product launches, and you could couple that with PR and storytelling. That was always a really great thing for Trello, and actually for every startup that I've worked at. Is trying to figure out what the story is, try to tell it in a different way, try to find the audience that might be more interested in one product launch versus another. And then so there's sort of different levers that you can pull with the product launches. It's how do you get your existing users excited? How do you get them to try the features? How do you get them to share? What are the tools that you're giving them, the resources that you're giving them that makes it even easier for them to share or bring in other people at their company or their network to become advocates for your product? So that was one tool. Another tool was content and having a really strong content strategy, which obviously you're thinking about given our conversation on the podcast today. But this is also something that I think a lot of startups get wrong is this, they start doing content too late. And the best time to start doing content is yesterday or maybe 6 months before you think you're ready, because you want to be building an audience and you want to be building thought leadership. And especially these days, it's a lot harder to do attribution for how people hear about your startup. It may take hearing about it on a podcast several times before they build up that awareness to then go and try the product. And that's really tough to measure. So I think I've listened to podcasts with other marketing leaders and talked to other marketing leaders at similar companies that have that similar sort of product-led growth model. And there's this belief that content and brand and community are all sort of touch points. And those, I'm always eager to learn what the definition is of those things at each company. And for Trello, community was all about there in the early days we had a Slack community with our most vocal advocates, and we would be sharing with them product releases ahead of time and getting feedback and doing AMAs with different leaders at the company. That was really important for us because we had our brand was really loved, and I think that the other piece of it is the brand and being differentiated and having sort of a really delightful product experience that went
Right.
all the way from signing up through every single customer interaction was something that we thought a lot about at Trello, and also something where I think internally we were very, very collaborative all the time. There wasn't ever this handoff of like what is product and what is marketing. And I think at companies, when you go through like a user sign up flow, for example, a lot of times you can tell because companies are sort of shipping the org chart, you can tell where like marketing ends and product begins because it like looks and feels different. And at Trello, we didn't have that because it was all very collaborative and it was like that on purpose. And so, and so I think social was a big thing for us. The community I mentioned, the brand, and then product marketing. So some of the other big moments where we saw unlocks of user growth had to do with being available. So I'll say quickly, one thing about Trello is that for us, like user growth was the number one most important thing in the early days. That was more important than monetization for us in the early days, for sure. And so from a product and marketing standpoint, we thought about how do we get as many people on as possible using the product. So number one, we need to be available every place where people are potentially using software. So, we had best in class mobile apps. We were one of the first collaboration apps on the Apple Watch, which always felt a little strange to me, but some people really loved it. I think that was really important. The other thing, we localized the app to 18 different languages and had a very, very strong international presence, international marketing. We did country launches, and we never until the acquisition and until we had sort of Atlassian's resources, both in terms of capital, but also in terms of knowledge and sophistication. The unit economics never made sense. Our product was so quickly growing organically that anytime people would say, well, what if we ran some ads? I would run the numbers and I would say, this is useless.
Yeah, doesn't make sense, right?
It just doesn't make any sense. I know you want to see a billboard. I want to see a billboard too, but it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Okay, so one kind of follow up on Trello being a very horizontal product as well, right? It's basically can cater all different use cases. I'm keen to dive a bit more to understand on the content and kind of SEO. I'm assuming also there was the SEO part there on that strategy. How much was anything specific around like use cases? How did you try to cater to this broad range of use cases and different types of users? Was that ever a thing, or was that something you focused on, or maybe not, because the brand and the the community growth side was much bigger?
We did have public boards, and we did see a fair amount of traffic coming in from the public boards. So, for example, some companies had their public roadmaps on Trello, and we would share those. And we had many, many public boards. I will say that the traffic that came from that strategy was lower intent, I think, than the traffic that we would see in other channels. I think specifically for content, our top of funnel, we had the traditional like top of funnel, middle funnel, bottom of funnel. Top of funnel for us was like people aspiring to be better, to use their time more efficiently. We were one of the first companies to double down on remote work and building out content about remote work, which came in handy, when the pandemic hit and people were looking for, best practices for remote work. And middle funnel for us was around, project management, time management, and introducing Trello and showing all the different use cases that Trello could be used for. And bottom of funnel was specifically very, very product focused. How to do this with Trello, how to use Trello's power ups. And so while we were horizontal, I think especially as time went on, we did become much more business focused. And I think around 2019, we did a big rebrand and became much more B2B oriented, because obviously as we matured and grew as a company, revenue became more important. The space became much more competitive. And so we began to focus much more on the business and enterprise side of the business.
And early on, in order to understand like top of funnel, middle of funnel, what really these people care about, so you can write the content around that specifically, how did you figure that out? Was that looking at your existing customer base, asking the people, or just also a bit of maybe intuition and just seeing where the market goes and following kind of the trends?
We try to be pretty data driven. So I'll say that, but we also never looked at user generated content. So the only way that we knew about how people use Trello was by talking to them. So there was some amount of experimentation, and then seeing, we had a big enough user base that we could see what types of content would be resonating and what kinds of content would drive people to engage in the product. We saw that, we had a very strong newsletter program. Every time people engaged with the newsletter, they had a much higher probability of becoming, MAU that month. And I think Trello was also this interesting product where people would use it in one part of their life, and they sort of associated it with that. Like, I just use Trello for, my website development. And then if you showed them a different use case, they would be like, whoa, like I can use Trello to run my PTA. And so our job in marketing was to make people have that aha moment, because what ended up happening is that as soon as they created a Trello board, they would invite people from whatever. So even, and that's in the early days also how we grew so quickly, was also having those personal use cases, which, long term, the more their product is exposed to these people, the more they end up bringing it. It was like this never ending beautiful cycle
Yeah.
of user acquisition that was mostly organic.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Cool. So you mentioned also about focusing on user growth. So that was early on, like the key, like the driver and the North Star metric. So was there a reason behind mainly focusing on, building out and perfecting the product? And when did the decision come, and how did the decision come to start monetizing Trello? And why not earlier? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's also one of the like known stories, right? That for quite a long time Trello hasn't monetized, which I think many companies do nowadays. But I'm keen to, yeah, when was the decision made, and how was that made?
Well, it was made very early on. I mean, Trello, I think Google Reader had just shut down, or it had shut down at some point in early Trello's product development. And so people were very wary of using a totally free product. So the team, this is before I was there, the team launched Trello like $5 a month, Trello Gold. It like didn't really do much, but it made people psychologically feel better that the company wasn't going to go away.
Right.
And so I think we always had a paid product. We launched our business product within the first 6 to 9 months of my being there. We always understood that that was going to be the future. We hired a VP of sales within the first few months that I worked very closely with. We did a lot of launched an enterprise product the following year, and so I think it was always a big part of our business. However, we could see, based on what was happening in the competitive landscape, it was sort of a huge race to see who could capture more of the market and who could have a higher moat. And our belief was that if we could become very sticky and similar, I think I remember talking to the Slack team in the early days where, it's a high switching cost product where people are using Slack, and then the user is not necessarily the buyer. The user is the people who are, using Slack to communicate. The buyer is someone in IT who sees all of this company stuff happening and is like, we should lock that down under an enterprise product. I think Trello was exactly the same way. And so I think many products of the day followed a very similar example. So for us, I mean, we were small. We were, I think maybe people don't know this, but we were a little over 100 people when we were acquired by Atlassian. And people were always surprised to learn how small of a team we were. So I think it just came down to how much we could accomplish as a team of our size, and also that we would just prioritize growth over revenue. And I think when we were acquired in 2017, we had already started very strategically making the shift towards being much more revenue driven and revenue focused. And then the acquisition happened, and that sort of changed the course of Trello's destiny.
Yeah. Cool. So regarding PR, just going back to something you said also previously, PR was also one thing, like basically creating a story around something you're launching on the product, bigger things. So typically for SaaS companies or for software companies, right, this is not one of the non-scalable channels, unless
Yes.
there's another secret that maybe, I mean, would love to hear how you have been thinking about that. And what are the best ways to leverage PR? Because it can't be scalable, but probably there are ways you can really use it to your, to your leverage on adding on top of what's happening. Maybe kind of, maybe just share a
Yeah.
bit about that. I'm always curious to know. Also, something that we as a company have never really focused on and never really putting ourselves out as, okay, here is something we did. Like we launched lots of things, but you never really think that's going to move the needle. Yeah. So really would love to learn a bit more there.
Yeah, you can be totally fine and never use PR as a channel. In my mind, it's sort of a kind of a free lever that you could be using in addition to whatever you're doing. The cost is not particularly high. It's just a matter of figuring out what the story is, and then figuring out who the best people are to tell that story. So it's very unpredictable, but I think that it's worth using, and it's worth thinking about how you are different, how your company is different, how you as a founder are different, what you can add to sort of, why this feature. It's just an important exercise. Also, we used to start out, we would write a press release for a feature before we would launch it. And then it became much more easy to go through that process of the product development, knowing what was important to our users. And then, so I guess the moral of the story is that you can't count on PR. It's certainly not a scalable channel, but I think that it's a fairly low cost, low resource way to get the word out there even more. And then it also sort of pays off when you can do it well, and when you have a few things that hit, all of a sudden it takes your credibility to a much higher level. So you can have the logos on the website, you have much greater distribution. I think distribution is the hardest thing for all startups. I mean, I'm a founder again, I'm going to say it, distribution is the hardest thing. And so there's sort of no reason why you shouldn't give it a shot. Because again, it's not like paid marketing where it takes a huge investment of time and energy, and yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that totally makes sense. So if you now kind of look back at Trello as like before the acquisition, so just one kind of last question on there, what would you do differently if you joined Trello now, knowing everything you know now and going through the experience?
Well, assuming it's still that time, it was. I don't know if I would do anything too differently. Maybe I would start focusing on revenue and building out this sales function a little bit earlier. Maybe I would devote more product resources to that. But ultimately, I don't know that I would change anything, because it ended up being a really great outcome for the team and for everyone involved. So yeah, I don't know that I would change anything.
Okay. Well, that's amazing, right? If you
Well, it's hindsight bias, It's like, what's the engineer?
you never know what would have happened, right? If you changed it. So
Yeah,
there's that as well.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Cool. So let's talk a bit about Trello's acquisition. So you're a small, scrappy team and a doer mentality. So suddenly getting acquired by a really big company that also has big marketing organization. So how was that? Like, what was life as in the company as a marketer before and after Trello? So you still led the team of marketing before and after, but what did change for you in general, and how different was your role running in this smaller company and being part of
Yeah.
the bigger company?
It was such an amazing experience. Atlassian at the time was, I think, around 1,100 or 1,200 people. So it was still quite small compared to how it is today. Today, I think it's around 10,000 people. So, but we got put into this, they separated, the marketing team went under the marketing umbrella, which was, I want to say it was around 300 people at that time. And then our R&D team went under the R&D umbrella. But Atlassian did a very smart thing, which was the first year after our acquisition, they had this do not disturb policy, because what they had learned was that from previous acquisitions that everyone at the company gets excited about the new acquisition and they want to do stuff with the people who are the acquiring the how do you say this? The company that was acquired. And so those people end up getting flustered and distracted, and it doesn't end up becoming a good integration process. And so I think that was very smart, because one of our big initiatives, probably the number one biggest initiative post-acquisition, it was to ship some sort of a Trello-y, what we call Trello-y, like feature that was really fun and a free feature that showed that Atlassian didn't quote unquote ruin Trello, because everyone was really upset after the acquisition. So we launched these Unsplash board backgrounds as our first big feature, and people were very happy about that, which I still love. So I think in terms of marketing, it was eye-opening. Atlassian culturally, from a marketing standpoint, was completely different than anything I'd ever experienced. It was a very data-driven, analytics-driven, measure 10 times, cut once type of a thing. And we, as a marketing organization, were much more about product marketing and storytelling and brand and, and content. And I think there was a lot to learn for us, for
From each
me
other.
specifically. Yeah. But also for them, because they would say, well, why did you make this change on your website? What were you measuring? What A/B testing platforms we're using? We're like, we're a tiny team. We have no engineering support. So we did this because of XYZ reason. And, that was very surprising to them, because it was, again, a very, very data-driven, analytics-oriented, growth-minded organization.
Which is great, but in a lot of times as well, right? If you're a small team and you're working very closely with the customers with day to day, their pains in and out. And a lot of the times you don't have to have a data to measure. You have qualitatively, that's actually much faster to make a decision, and what's going to have an impact or whatnot.
Absolutely. I think that we had so much to learn from each other. My team, definitely, we became much more data driven and learned a lot. At the same time, I think Atlassian at that point, even at that point, the organization was slowing in terms of what it could do from a marketing standpoint, because it became much more complex, and a lot of decision makers, a lot of data, and nobody really knew like how to get something out quickly. And so I think my job as the leader was to, if we were going to be hitting our goals, we had to get integrated with Atlassian, but also maintain enough independence that we could continue to deliver on the expectations from the Trello team within Atlassian, and not be bogged down by a lot of the bureaucracy and like process coming from the big company side.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Really interesting. So I want to pause here about Trello and kind of just dive into your experience in Hoop. So tell us a bit more about Hoop, and why when you started in the first place, and what is Hoop? Like, how you explain 5-year-old what Hoop is all about? Like you're actually your kids.
Yes. Well, my kids have no idea what I do. But basically, Hoop is just approaching, taking all of the science and research around making better decisions organizationally, and distilling that into software that people can understand and use, and make better decisions, minimize bias. Without really, it's almost like taking your vitamins, but they're like the Flintstone vitamins, so they taste good and you don't realize they're good for you. So maybe that's my 5-year-old explanation.
Okay. Can you bring some like concrete examples of decisions that, for example, as a company, I can use Hoop and make on my day-to-day work?
Yes. Yeah. So we're approaching the decision making problem in sort of 3 ways. The first is helping companies put a process around decision making. A lot of times people don't know how decisions are made, who's got decision rights at an organization. How did companies even make this decision? Number 2 is documentation around decisions. So companies, a lot of times decisions are made in meetings, or they're spread across lots of different tools, and there's no central location for like, wait, why was that decision made? Or you hire someone new and they want to understand an architectural change to the product. where do they find that sort of information? And then the third thing that's sort of leading to that is that decision log. So that central location where you can access all of the decisions that were made at an organization. And I think that's the current problem that we're approaching today. In the future, if we can solve that, it unlocks a lot of opportunities around helping companies understand which parts of the organization are making faster decisions, better decisions, who is participating in these types of decisions. And so we have two ways that we're doing that right now. We have a web app, which is in alpha, and would love to have lots of folks signing up so we can learn. And then the second thing is a Slack integration, because we want to eventually be in all places where people are making decisions and be able to capture those. And so right now, and it's hard to get people to use new tools. So we are launching a Slack integration, or we've launched a Slack integration where you can capture decisions in Slack, and then they go to that central place, and you can, in the future, you'll be able to organize them and reference them. And so I can give some specific examples if that's helpful. It can be any decision, any small decision, like, when is our next offsite, or what levers should we consider for our next marketing campaign, all the way up to more strategic decisions, like should we localize the product, who's our next hire, what should our marketing spend be. It's very cross-functional right now, because that what we're finding is that the cross-functional decisions are the ones that are the hardest to understand, like who's got decision rights, what's the expectation for when this decision will be made. And I can geek out about this stuff all the time, but
okay. So you have launched the alpha product. It has early access now. People can sign up for early access. How do you, we have never done that in our company. So I'm really curious to learn, how do you kind of stay close to customers, and how do you basically understand their needs, what types of decisions they're trying to make? Again, it's all horizontal, right? They can make then with the platform any decision and document any of that. And how do you prioritize what should come next for Hoop?
That's a great question. We're sort of making it up as we go along, which we've done before and have been successful at. So hopefully it works out this time. But we have all of these folks who are interested. One of the interesting things is that this is such a universal problem that whenever we're talking about it, people are like, yes, this is a problem in my company. And so every week we're letting a handful of people from the waitlist in sort of a cohorted way. We're onboarding them in a high touch way. So it's basically an onboarding call with myself or one of my co-founders. And in that, we talk about their problems. We introduce our product. We create an account for them. And then after a couple of weeks, we touch base. We create a Slack channel where we share, answer questions and share sort of real-time updates. And then we are creating these feedback loops where every couple of weeks we're checking in and maybe having a call with customers, or, even understanding if the product didn't gain adoption within that team, like why not? And I think every week we're writing down what we've learned and sharing and talking about it as a team, and then using that to prioritize what the next sort of sprint will look like. We're a very small team. We're only, we're 5 people now full time. And so it's this really like nascent, going from 0 to 1 kind of a moment for Hoop.
Yeah, amazing. Which is the most like interesting and challenging part as well.
Yeah, it's hard.
So talking about challenges, so far throughout that process, like what have been the biggest and hardest challenges for the team so far and for Hoop?
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge right now is that people, while they identify that they have this problem, because we are not prescriptive about what types of decisions Hoop is used for, there is that
Should have
question
templates.
of, well, we're thinking about it. It's interesting because we sort of struggled with this at Trello too, where we were trying to be
Yeah.
horizontal and not prescriptive, and that opened the door for a lot of really creative, personalized use cases. But it was a little bit of a learning curve, and so I think that's what we're seeing here. I think the big difference now versus when we were doing this at Trello many years ago is that now people use a lot of different software tools, and there's a lot of information flow between tools, and then you add in meetings, and just information is floating around everywhere. So part of our thesis is building out Hoop so that it can be everywhere where people are making decisions, and then sort of bring it together. So that's what
Yeah.
we're going
Yeah.
towards.
Okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. And like being a small team, having limited resources, and also building out the product while trying to understand, use cases and all that. So how do you solve this like dilemma of shipping something with like minimum or good enough quality versus perfecting the product before launch?
Yes, this is a great question for my co-founder, Justin, who I think struggles with this on a daily basis because, we want everything to be beautiful and perfect. At the same time, right now our alpha is built on a no-code platform because that was
Nice.
the easiest thing. Yeah, and so there are obviously limitations to what we can do on that
Right.
platform. So I think the coming from our backgrounds, there is a bias towards perfection. However, we have to understand that in the startup world, speed is life, and you just have to ship before you feel comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's like the daily challenge. You have to always wait. Okay, what's perfect? What's good enough? And how fast you should move.
Exactly. Yeah, and we actually, even today, we were there was a new feature we wanted to roll out, and I made a hoop for it. I said, do we feel comfortable releasing this feature today? And one of the things that Hoop does, which is cool, is that we hide everybody's responses until you've had a chance to respond, so that you
Yeah.
get unbiased feedback. And so it was interesting to see like who felt comfortable moving forward and who was like, I think I need another day or two before we're ready.
Yeah. Oh, nice using your own product for sure. I think that's the best way to also perfect it to an
Yes.
extent. Cool. And how much actually regarding community, like Trello has been a very community-led company, and how much do you really leverage at the moment the community side in Hope?
Yeah, it's interesting. Community is defined in so many different ways. I think we are starting to build out that muscle. We're building out the content side. We want to be the place where people come to learn about, decision making best practices. Another big area for us that we see being sort of thought leaders around is asynchronous work, because we as a company work asynchronously. We also work a 4-day work week, even though we're a startup. And these are all things that we want to build a community and build awareness around. And so we literally just launched our blog last month, and it's like the very baby. It's like a baby community. And even trying to understand what that means, because the big difference, I think, now versus when we were doing this in 2014 is like everybody's sort of caught on to it. And I think if you want to do something meaningful, it's got to be different. It's got to be authentic, and it's got to be not something that everybody else is doing. And I think we have to figure out what that means for ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. And the community also, like nowadays, is for a typical B2, not big B2B companies, not enterprise, especially consumerized kind of B2B products. It's becoming kind of a norm, right? So you have to be close to your community. You have to be close to your audience to really, yeah, have the right message and also have the authenticity and bring them along with you as you're growing.
Yes, definitely. I think AI is also, how do you have any conversation these days in tech without bringing up AI? But I think that's also something we're thinking a lot about, and how that, and especially I think for marketers are very, very, it's something that profoundly changes how you think about marketing and what is authentic and what is human. And so
Mm-hmm.
these are all questions that I think everybody is thinking about as it relates to their own marketing strategy, as it relates to their own products. It's a very, very fascinating time to be working in tech.
Yeah, I totally agree. Absolutely. Okay, so one last thing regarding kind of the hoop and something that's interesting. You mentioned you have built it right now with NoCode tools, which is really exciting for me to learn. So why was that decision? And then also, what generally do you think is like, is changing in the workplace for modern knowledge workers? How they're going to be
Mhm.
building tools, how they're going to be using software or building software even internally. And
Mhm.
yeah, and then as a follow-up of that, how do you think the new generation, our kids and the future workers are going to learn and use software?
Yeah. I mean, it's changed so much. I started my career in tech at this point, I think like, oh my God, how long has it been? 16, 17 years ago. And then you couldn't do anything without engineers. And I think, even our reason for building on no code was of the three co-founders, one was technical, but he and saw the opportunity that he could, be even more impactful rather than writing the custom code himself. That he could just use this platform and build something quickly and start to get people using it and start to learn. So I think our goal was always to build a no code MVP, learn, hire engineers, bring,
Mm-hmm.
because all this stuff takes time, right?
Yeah,
And so that when we were writing our custom code, we would know specifically, we would have made
exactly.
all of the
Right.
expensive mistakes. So I think that was our strategy. I think in the future, it's just going to, I mean, the bar for building is just going way down. Obviously, with your product, the software, people are able to do things that you would have had to hire, an agency or a firm to do before if you were a small business or if you were a tech company. I think we built our first landing pages on software, or on software.
Yo, I
So
didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah, we did. It was great. That was the first time that I had used, besides playing with, but actually like used for my business, no code software. I was like, man, this is changing so much. And I think it's really great because um, you're making something that used to be available only to a very small subset of people. You're able to sort of unleash that ability to be creative and more technical to a more general audience. So I think for our kids, the real question is like, what skills are going to be valuable? What are the jobs that they're going to be paid to do? Are they going to be overseeing a lot of like robot AI type stuff? Is it going to be, instead of a marketing team, is it going to be just one marketer managing a lot of different
Robots.
tools? Yeah, like I don't know, but it's really, I think we were definitely seeing like this paradigm shift moment in what's possible and what the future looks like.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, amazing. I mean, I'm really looking forward to see what's happening in the next like 10 years, right? That's
Yeah.
it's just moving so quickly and things are changing so quickly. Cool. So just let's move on for a bit. I want to also touch upon your angel investing. So you're also an angel investor in a number of amazing companies, and would love to understand how does that involvement kind of, why you decided angel investing in the first place, and then also how does that involvement help you be better at your own startup or make decisions? I mean, I'm obviously you are helping and supporting all the startups, but how does that work help you back in your day-to-day job or your company?
Definitely. I think when you're a founder, and this is something that this is my first time being a founder where I've also been an angel investor. I think one of the profound things about being a founder is how lonely it is and how you feel like maybe your problems, it's almost like being a parent maybe too, because
Yeah.
when your kid is having a problem, it's like the end of the world for you and you're like, "Oh my God, this is just me that's dealing with it." But it turns out there's this whole universe of people that are all dealing with the same problems. And I think being an angel investor, you just have access to more information about the problems that people are dealing with. I think also for me specifically, you know, when I'm able to help my portfolio companies, a lot of times I find myself answering questions that I've recently asked myself in my own business. It's a lot easier to give someone else advice than to like listen to your own advice and to actually execute on your own advice. So I just think that it's been really, really impactful to me as a founder. I'll say also that I just love startups and I love helping other founders and being part of the journey for a lot of other companies. And when you are an operator, you're making a big bet on one thing, the thing that you're working on. And when you're an investor, you're making a lot of little bets, but you don't actually get to like do the work. And I think that's what I found frustrating when I was considering doing the investor out full time is like, I actually still want to do the work. I get a lot of energy from like doing the actual work.
Right.
So I think being an angel investor gives you the opportunity to do both. The challenge with it though is that it takes a lot of time and energy. And so I think I took about a year and a half between leaving Atlassian and starting Hoop. And that was a time when I had where I made a lot of investments because I had the time to dedicate to sourcing deals and getting deal flow and building like a reputation. And before that, I had made a handful of angel investments, but those were much more like inbound. Hey, Stella, this is someone I worked with before and they're starting a company. And so I think that's just one thing to consider is that to do it well, it takes a lot of time and energy.
Yeah. And do you have like a support group, I'm gonna say, but like people, like-minded people around you that, I mean, angel investing is a job on its own, and there is lots of angel investors that, it's a lonely job as well, right? If you
Yes.
don't have your own fund, you don't have your team. So how do you keep up with trends? How do you share, learnings and experiences with others? And where do you find that support?
I find that most people end up doing angel investing when they are at transition points, and either they go on and launch a fund, and they use their angel portfolio as evidence that they're a good investor, so that they can raise money from LPs, or they end up going the operator route and joining a company or starting their own company, and then it's just sort of something that's they can sit on their laurels from the deals that they've done and rely on their network and schedule meetings with other people who are like, let's say, other angels who have gone on to raise their funds. Companies are always looking for value add angel investors. So one thing you can do is position yourself as I'm the pricing angel, or I'm the PLG marketing angel. And then as companies are looking for small angel checks, that you get brought into those deals. So I think that's probably the strategy. But I don't really have a support group or anything. It just, between being a founder and being a parent, that's like 105% of my time. So I think
Yeah.
for now, and I think there's different seasons of life, right? Like I think maybe when we're further along in Hoop, that maybe there will be a little bit more time to dabble in angel investing again. But it's certainly not something I'm super
Yeah.
actively doing right now.
I can relate so much. Yeah, definitely. Like parenting and running a company all on its own is already two full-time jobs. So absolutely.
Yes, definitely.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Stella. It was really great to chat. Thank you for this
Yeah.
incredible conversation. I learned a lot myself as well. And yeah, where can people find and learn more about you and Hoop,
Yes. So
and
you
sign
can
up
find
also
me.
for the product?
Yes, it's hoop, like a hula hoop .app, and you can find me on Twitter. I'm Startup Stella, and so that should be easy to remember. And yeah, I look forward to seeing folks on the alpha wait list and learning about how you make decisions at your company.
Yeah, I'll make sure to join as well. Thank you so much for joining me.
Of course.